Ooh-wee, what's going on YouTube? It's Donnie B all day. Listen, if you hear a bunch of noise in the background, that guy has been going to town on these marrow bones. He's actually confiscated the Roscoe's bone too, and anytime Roscoe gets near it, he growls. So let me get that one. All right, great. Now I'll have 2 points of noise. Way to go. And here comes the big guy. He's going to bring it in here to be louder than Crowder. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go over a little history, and I'm going to show you guys the knife. So now, when I started collecting knives, like what got me going was a few things. The first knife I ever bought, and this isn't the first one, but the first knife I ever bought with my own money and the first knife I had are two different kinds of knives. The first knife I ever had was a simple not this one. My girl found me this one. This one is a case blade from the year I was born. So this one's crazy. This is like 400 years old. The first knife I ever had that I either found or was given to me or was laying around the house and I just took it was very, very similar to this, like a Stockman or a penknife. And that's what got me going. When I started cutting with something simple like this. And my passion for these guys today, you guys have seen the videos, I've done plenty of them. I love them. I love them. You look at Jersey Knife Guy, he's a specialist in classic folders, pocket knives. And this guy right here, this little guy will whittle your teeth off, and it makes a great toothpick. So that's what really, really got me going, was finding, like, I mean, they were a lot bigger back then. Things have changed. So then the first knife I ever bought, my buddy's uncle sends us to the store, right? It was called a 5-10 cent Kensworth store, right? You could get stuff dirt cheap there. And, but that doesn't mean everything was 5 or 10 cents. So he sends us to the store to get something for him, and he gives us, you know, a bill or whatever. I can't remember. It was a $20 bill or something. And he says, we were just young, you know, we were probably 6th grade, somewhere in there. And he says to us, he says, here, go get me this. It was probably like a pack of cigarettes or something. And because that's what you did. You sent little kids out back then. And he says, and then get yourselves something. So he was thinking like a Butterfinger. So what we did is we each came back home with knives that looked a lot like this. Now this is the Buck 110. This wasn't what we got, but it was exactly like it. It was, you know, they made, especially back then, everywhere you went, you found these style knives, just everywhere, and they were $5 a pop. So we pretty much spent that whole $20 bill, got what he needed, and then he was pissed. He's like, I meant get yourself a can of soda. But we got to keep our knives. And my very first ever knife that I bought, not with my own money, but that I bought, was this style knife, right? And it's a Hunter folder. And this thing carried with me for so many good trips, man. All my camping trips as a kid, I always had this. So then all of a sudden, Rambo happens, and they start selling these back screw off knives, and this isn't one just like it, but it's very, very close to as far as like how they were made. They were a very like cheap hollow handle. They had a screw that holds this on right here, except the rear that screws on and off then was like this bubble with an O-ring. It was just awful. And they had the compass inside of it. I don't know if this one does. This is a Harbor Freight model. So this one's actually, even though it's still cheap, it does have a compass. Even though it's still cheap, and it does have the survival kit, it's better. It's far better than the ones we started with. And if anybody has one, you'll remember that the blade is kind of small, and it loosened constantly. It just always loosened. It was always dull. This Harbor Freight guy is probably like $5 at Harbor Freight, and I have used the snot out of this knife. this is not brand new, you know. But that's what did it, man. That Rambo, that First Blood knife was the one, and I was like, yeah, I had to have it. So when we found these cheap back screw things for us back then, that was the only. You weren't buying any others. There was no Lyle knives for sale. There was no Hollywood Collectors Group and all. No. You just went and got the cheapest piece of crap you could find that was as close to what you wanted as possible. And for us, it was those bubble back, short blade, hollow handle knives. And because it was a hollow handle, that was our Rambo knife. So realizing that knife wasn't going to be very good, that's when I got my very first buoy. And this is cool because this is the Cisco high carbon buoy, right? Everybody knows them. Normally this is an S guard, but I shaved it down. Normally this is like a walnut handle, but I changed them up and then gave it my own scale pattern. And I basically just redid this knife. I redid the finish, everything. This is one of my favorite knives. This thing is a freaking user. What kind of user could it be for this? As in today's world, they're still between 15 and 25 bucks anywhere you find them. Anywhere you find them. Back then it was like 15 bucks, right? I bought one of these. Let's see. This was from the year of my birth. This is a 1973 knife. That's right, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, you are way too sexy to be 653 years old. But guess what? I know. I work on it. So I went out and bought one of these when I was a teenager, right? When I was a teenager, a long time ago. I have had a Cisco high carbon knife at some point in all of my life. I have never gone through life without having one of these, right? The number this one is in the collection that I have bought is number 2. That's right. I have only had 2 of these. The first one I had, I lost. I bought a new one immediately. And the first one I had for just about 30 years, somewhere in there, maybe pretty close to that, maybe a little bit less than that, 25 years. When I lost it probably, I want to say 10 years ago, maybe not even, maybe like 8 years ago. I think I got this one when I came back from Afghanistan. Then I came back in 2012. So right around there. So between 2012 to a teenager, I had the same one. The same one. That means every camping trip I took, I used the same one. Every camping trip I took. I've been in the woods all my life, right? So you think about when people say, oh, you know, budget knives and bull crap and blah, 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 blah. This one I got in 2012. I use this knife. I love this knife. The reason I refinished the blade is because I use it so much. It was looking crappy. So I was like, well, I want to make it look new again. So I gave it a satin finish. Then I just don't like the S style when they're really thin brass guards. So I cut it down. The wooden grips after a bunch of years start to get looking like caca. And I wanted to just see. I was like, you know what? My old one, I just let be the old one. And I just let it ride. This one, gosh, I've always had one of these knives. The edge is great, right? The edge is great. The blade is great. The grip, even though it's custom, it's great. The sheath, this is the same sheath from 2012. My old one, you should have seen my old one by the time I lost it. And I lost it in the woods, as a matter of fact. But my old one was just frayed, or the tip was sticking out. It was and they're cheap sheaths, but they just, somehow they last. I don't know how, but they do. These ones, if I lost this today, right now, if this went, oh no, where is it? I would go out and buy another one immediately. And I'm talking, without hesitation, I would buy another Cisco high carbon buoy, because these things kick ass. All the knife snobs in the world, you could say whatever you want. You've never used one of these for 20 years, I'll tell you that. The same one. So that gets me on to passion, right? I just developed a passion for blades. And that's when I came across Jim Frost. Ooh, I was young, and Frost Cutlery was like, oh, the knives they all sold for, they were like either between $50 and $100, like $99.99 in these catalogs. But I would get these catalogs with dealer prices, and I got a dealer price card, and I'd be picking up the $100 knives for $50. And I thought, whoa, these are great. These are the greatest knives in the world, because they were all cool and they were all weird looking. And so I picked up, not too long ago, maybe a year or two ago, an Undertaker III. Classic Jim Frost style. Rest in peace, my friend. And I say rest in peace, my friend. While I've never met him in person, I had a conversation with Jim a long time ago, as a matter of fact, back when I was young and I started collecting. And I wrote a poem about Frost knives, alone in the jungle with my gun and my knife. And it just, it came down to, like, I ran out of bullets, but all was not lost. I still had my blade made from Frost. And they ended up, he contacted me personally and asked, hey, would you mind if we use this in an ad? And I was like, yeah. So I guess he used it in a magazine ad, I think, is what he told me. So then a bunch of years later, this was right before he died, this was a couple years ago, I'm talking to Frost Cutlery. They sent me a badass folding knife, a D2 folding knife that is phenomenal. And I have it upstairs. I should have brought it down. But it's probably the most quality blade they've ever made. It is nasty. The girl was telling me, she's like, this is the direction we would like to try and take the company. We would like to think, before they even put it on the market, before they went for sale, she said, we would like to see what you think of it first. And I was like, honor. Are you kidding me? And she had no idea of my dealings with Frost back then. So she has me on speakerphone, and he was in the room, and I didn't know. So I begin to tell her, and I tell her about this poem, and I start reciting it. And I hear, hey, I remember this guy. That was Jim Frost in the background. She goes, oh yeah, Jim's here, blah, blah. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. It was like 20 years later, Jim Frost remembered me. I was like, guy was just crazy cool, man. Jim was all right. So this is the Undertaker. I think, there you go. They have stats on it. 16 inches overall, stainless steel blade, 440. Silver wood handle. Remember, they used to use a lot of frost wood, that rainbow style wood. It was like a plywood. Comes with heavy duty nylon sheath. Well, how are we doing? So now, what I found about these Frost blades is these are now collectibles. If you get the older Frost blades, some of them are pretty expensive. Especially some of the more elaborate ones. And I wish I still had all, I mean, I had a bunch. I went Frost Cutlery crazy. I bought up everything. So here's this one, and I think you could hear it rattle. I mean, the pins have probably loosened over time. This is really, really old. This is really old. So you can see right there. Let's see if there's a, nope, just designed by Jim Frost. I was hoping there was a date. But, I mean, you could. This is what they were known for. They were fantasy stuff. So they sold a lot of the Hibben designs. Why? Because Hibben designed a ton of fantasy stuff. So it was like right in there. So to get a Gil Hibben design back then, like, I didn't know the difference between, you know, made by who. So, you know, I thought Gil Hibben was a Gil Hibben. I didn't, you know. But it was crazy cool. So these knives were just the stuff back in like the 80s. The 80s to the 90s even, was all about like Frost Cutlery. You could hear a little rattle. I don't know if it's from, I would assume it's just from the scales. I think that's what it is, as a matter of fact. I could actually feel it being a little bit loose. But as a collector's item, I would love to take this out and actually show you that Frost Cutlery knives worked, but that would be dumb. And, well, you guys all know me. Let's go play with it. Oh. All right, so the handles are actually really, like, I can pinch and pull and get them moving. So if I do some hard downward throws or whatever, they might pop off. But if they do, I'm just going to reuse these exact same scales unless I break one, and I will JB weld them on. I don't know what they used for glue, but apparently when it's over 20 years old, it probably doesn't stick. I just brought this out here. This is how muggy it is. Can you see that right there? Watch. That is how moist the air is. We just walked outside from an air-conditioned home. It is so muggy out here. It's 100% humidity today. Look at this. that is wetness on the blade that you're seeing. That's not like finger grease. I just looked over and I saw a haze on the blade. Like, it's wet to the touch. That's crazy freaking humid. That's crazy humid. Hey, dogs. Oh, man. Let me get these guys settled real quick. Testing my last damn nerve. All right, so let's check the balance first. Man, they made everything as like a fantasy fighter, like every single knife. They were like, we don't need camp knives, let's just fight bears. All right, so let's do a couple drop tests. We'll see. Hopefully this won't pop off the scales. Whew, you can hear it rattle. But I mean, the balance in these things, these were dead nut straight. We're gonna do a couple hard downward throws. We're gonna check the tip stability. We're gonna test the depth, the bite, and it's normally to test to see if scales will loosen. These are already loose, so we will see what happens. Toing. But the bite is crazy good. Oh, man. All right, so obviously, I mean, these were all, especially back then, these were used constantly. So they made the steel at least able to be used. We're gonna figure out, this is an old blade. We're gonna figure out how sharp it is. We're gonna figure it out. We're gonna figure it out together. Man, you got so much going on too. You got these serrations, the holes, the shark fins. It's like anything you could put on a blade, they put in it. All right, so let's see if we can't get a push cut. Look at that. Look at that. Holy crap. 20 years later, and these things made in China, designed by Jim Frost in USA. And this thing is still sharp. Crazy sharp. Let's do a downward stab through the whole bag. Bunch of leather here. We're gonna go reverse grip. Bah! And not only did it go all the way through, but then it bit like crazy into the wood. Let's do a leather strap cut here. Let's do a leather strap cut. Let's try to do a leather strap cut. Not a problem. And it just buried itself into the log. And I remember back in the day when knives started really popularizing, and all the knife snobs out there would just talk so much smack about Frost knives, and I used to hate listening to that. I still hate it because they're stupid. But oh, you can't use them, blah blah blah. I used these things all the time back in the day. I'm talking all the time. I used these guys, they were fun. They were fun to use. But I don't know. The knife snobs then are the same knife snobs now, man. It's the same kind of people. If it's 440 made in China, it's never gonna work. Well, I'll tell you, this 440 made in China. I got this thing. It was used, but I don't think they ever used it. But look at this thing. It's just shaving. Look at the bark. It's just shaving the bark. And speaking of shaving, I might have to shave a couple necks here in a minute if that Roscoe keeps on leaving. Hey, Roscoe. That boy, he's old as dirt. He's on his way out, man. I'll tell you, Roscoe doesn't have too many years left. But he gets in trouble like a young dog. Hold on. Remember the other day, I closed out a video and I went looking for him. I'm like, I gotta go find Roscoe. He was laying down on the porch, right? But he was just laying there. I didn't even see him. He was right behind me. I watched the video later and I was like, oh, look at that. All right, so let's see. These cheap 440 made in China crappy knives. Well, if I had a cheap 440 made in China crappy knife and I was stuck in the woods and I needed to make a fire, and I needed to make a shelter, I needed to make a chair or a coat rack, I need to make a spear to fish with, I need to make an arrow to go with my new homemade bow. Or if I ran out of arrows with my regular bow and thought, oh my God, now I'm dead. Well, guess what, man? These cheap Chinese-made 440 Frost Cutlery fantasy blades would have kept you alive. They would have kept you alive. As a matter of fact, today, if I went out right now into the woods, if I went out for a hike, and then all of a sudden a storm happened, and there was some kind of, the path caved in, or something happened where I got stuck in the woods, and I said, great, all I brought was my fantasy frost cutlery knife. The great wouldn't be as sarcastic as I just made it sound. I would say, great, good thing I brought a knife. I know that's going to actually work. And while this is not a knife I would choose, it's a knife that works, right? It's a knife that works. It's going to get the job done no matter what. You know what I mean? I'm not saying, stand back, D-Bad Preacher. I got the Undertaker III. No, that's not happening. But if I just happen to have that on me for some reason, maybe I'm walking to this old shack in the woods where this nomad lives, and he's like, dude, I really would like to buy your Undertaker. I'll bring it out to you. Uh-oh, something goes wrong on the way there. Get attacked by something, anything. That's a good boar knife right there, I'll tell you that. You never know, but no, I mean, man, people just don't know. People just don't know. Everybody thinks quality is subjected to dollar. And everybody thinks quality is subjected by place of manufacturing. Well, we have recently blown that right out of the water. I mean, we have blown that right out of the water, right through the knots, right through the knots. No warping, none at all. That blade, without the streaks on it from going through the wood, is the same as it was brand spanking new. No chipping, no crapping, nothing. No, nothing. And I'm not going to get out there and tell you, go buy some frost cutlery blades for your heavy duty survival skills. I'm not going to tell you that. What I'm going to tell you though is, if you're one of those punks who thinks that just because it's a frost country blade, I had the right word, a frost cutlery blade made in China, don't be that jerk and say, oh, well, then it's obviously garbage. Don't be that guy. Just be the realistic guy. Be the guy who says, okay, well, at least it's still a knife, because that's what it is. Say what you want, it's still a freaking knife. So I just wanted to get out here and use my frost cutlery collectible blade because that's what I do. And basically, maybe give a little education. A little education on, one of those don't judge a book by its cover things. If you see this in the store, it's like a gigantic gas station knife, right? And, your first thought is to say, okay, stay away from that one. But here's the deal. Maybe you were at some kind of, I don't know, flea market or something. You rock around, blah, 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 blah. Man, I'm blaming the humidity. It's not the fact that I'm like, but maybe you're walking around a flea market, you come across a table, and he's got a bunch of these old, weird-looking frost cutlery knives, and they're, $10 a piece. I'd buy them. I would. Not because I plan on taking them out into the woods, but because I know that if I happen to have one and I was out in the woods, I'd be okay. I happen to know that if I had one in the closet and I had one by the back door, or I had one by the front door, I have one where I can grab them at points of need. The just in case points of need, I know it's going to work. I know it's going to get the job done. That's it. I know 100%. This thing, it batons, it chops, it cuts, it does everything a knife should do in a weird looking package with materials that aren't going to be your favorites. They're just not. But here it is. Look at that. Even though they didn't pop off, I still might take it apart and re-put them on. I don't know. But it's just cool, man. If you've never owned like these frost cutlery fantasy pieces, you've missed out on part of your childhood, because getting these is what was cool back in the day for you know, people who just didn't know a lot about knives. Like, I didn't know squat about knives. I just knew that, oh, they were cool looking, man. That's cool looking, and they're huge. This is way bigger than the Hunter Folder. So I don't know. That's it. These things still work. I used them as a kid. I used them a lot. I mean, nothing was better than my Cisco. Nothing was better than that Cisco high carbon buoy. That thing just kept on trucking. I will never not have one. I will never ever not have one. And who knows, the one I have now, I might just have for the rest of my freaking life. Because if I didn't lose that first one, I'd still have that one. So that's it. Frost Cutlery Undertaker III. Man, it might be what it is, but what it is it's still a freaking knife. I am Donnie B all day. And until next knife.